Hello, my name is Lavano Mishakin, and this is the FarmLink design system. And the purpose of this design system is to ensure consistency, improve efficiency, and to maintain brand identity across different platforms. So the first topic I'll be going over is the FarmLink logo. So I would like to discuss a little bit about the brand identity. So for FarmLink, the logo represents the connection between farmers, communities, and charities. Hence, the greens are used to represent fresh produce, and the heart is just a representation of charity. So on the screen, there are two different logos. There's the primary logo, which is to the left, which is the horizontal logo, and the vertical logo, which was created for space constraints. So a designer can use either logo depending on their need for space. And at the bottom, I give specific guidelines on how the logo is to be used in live space. So on this screen, this is the logo color palette guidelines, which also ties into the brand identity. So on the left are the core colors, and I give a breakdown on how each section of the logo is to be colored. And at the bottom, you'll see the logo, the centered logo being used and how it is placed in relation to information on different cards and screens. So again, at the bottom, you'll see it in a form, and on the right hand side, you'll see the logo being used um, on the application itself. So on the top right corner, that's where the logo would be placed. So on this section of the design system, the designer can kind of have an idea of how the logo should not be used. So these are very clear guidelines about it not being stretched, it being used against busy backgrounds, distorted, or the colors changed outside of the color palette that um, was created on the previous screen. So for accessibility, if someone was to have vision impairments, in some of these versions on this particular screen where it's distorted, they wouldn't be able to really see the logo itself, and it might cause some issues. So in this section of Design Guide, I go over typography guidelines such as the typeface, which is Enter. That is the typeface used throughout the entire document and is broken down into three weights: bold, medium, and semi-bold, which for the bold, as far as hierarchy of information, that would be your titles or anything that is that you want the user to gravitate towards, what you would want them to see first. And I go over alignment, which everything in the application as far as text is aligned to the left. Also go over line height, which is important when placing text over different images and shapes, boxes, etc. So in this part of the uh, design system, it just kind of gives more typeface guidelines. So what I've done is I've highlighted in green specific instructions on how the typeface would be used, which I went over in the previous slide, such as the bold for titles and 20 medium for is ideal for secondary text, and the smaller 16 is used for tertiary content. So on this screen, it just gives examples on how the text is actually applied to the application. So I've highlighted in green the different font weights, like as far as the spacing and paragraph information is in green, to show you it's everything is aligned to the left, and how the tertiary text is used underneath the images, and how the titles are used as far as the 24 bold font weight. So this section of the design system goes over layout and grid guidelines. So I put specific numerical values as far as pixels for placement. As you can see, this is a single column grid, And I've also put information about the margin. So what is highlighted in green is the grid itself. So you can see that the different pixels and the actual centered column grid. On the second image, you'll see the margin space, which is 50 pixels on each side, left and right. And at the bottom is just an image of how the um, how the actual app adapts to different platforms. So you'll see it starts with mobile to desktop. So I felt as though using a centered grid is easily adaptable to different platforms. So this section of the design system goes over UI components such as buttons, button states, and specific instructions on padding and width and height. Now sometimes these may be um, adjusted, may need a little bit of adjustment but for the most part I've tested it out on different screens to make sure that it adapts to mobile. Of course, that would include your phones and tablets and desktop. So I want to briefly go over platform adaptation. So as far as the icons and images that would be created, made a few suggestions as far as starting off small. So if you're creating an icon for the FarmLink application, I would start off with 24 by 24. That way it can scale up and it is adaptable on all platforms. So I would always suggest starting small and then gradually making images bigger. That way it doesn't lose the integrity of the graphics. So on this screen, it just goes over icon guidelines and usage as far as shapes. So when placing the icons inside of maybe squares or circular shapes, it should always be centered. I also go over, like I've just said before, about designing any images or icons at 24 by 24, which is fairly small and it's scalable. As you can see, if the picture of the FarmLink truck, it starts off at 24, which is at 100%, and then I was able to scale it up to about 1,000%. And it just shows how the picture is still intact. It didn't lose. I didn't have to take away from anything at all because it was just I started off small. So at the bottom are just examples of how the icons are used and what they look like within the app. So on this screen, these are some more examples and different UI components of how they are used on the actual application and what they look like. So as far as the icons go, in this first screen where it says forms, there is a input field. So there are microphones for voice input. So everything is aligned to the right hand side. They're still centered. I don't know if you can really see that with the screen being so small, but also with the navigation bar. As far as interactivity with the icons, the user can see what screen they are on because there will be a visual indication of color added to that specific screen on the navigation bar. And on the cards, I do go over specifications on how the cards are created, which they are created with a 10 corner radius. So on this screen, these are more cards, but except for I'll be going over the interaction pattern. So for example, this screen at the bottom right hand side is a confirmation screen where the user has already filled out their information as far as what they are going to get picked up. So anyway, these different modals will pop up. So if everything is okay and everything's filled out correctly, it'll say pickup confirmed with the green check mark. So green pretty much means to proceed. Red is a restriction. So for instance, at the bottom, if you look, there is a red modal that popped up. So that is because maybe the information wasn't filled out all the way or something is missing. And also use orange throughout the application as like a warning. So that'll pop up if Or like, are you sure that you want to go ahead and get these items picked up? So again, just to reiterate the interaction patterns, I did create a page for designers to use that have the different color palettes they can choose for interactivity. So if they're creating hover states or alerts, here's a section kind of to guide them towards what the colors are used for. So at the bottom you can see alert colors, button colors as far as hover states, or if you want to make a card with that a user would hover over. On this page they can find any of the colors that can kind of guide them towards the decisions on what to use for those different states to show interactivity. So in this section, of course, these are the different design tokens where the users can use the different typography, the weight, alignment, line height. Here they can also have a guide to spacing. It gives specific details as well as the color palette that is used throughout the entire application. So these are the design tokens. So this would be the final section of the design system where I go over the best practices in general for designing for FarmLink as well as accessibility tips. So on here you'll see it's kind of in order. It'll have the subject, best practice, and then an accessibility tip. So I would be going over the typography and text hierarchy as I've mentioned in the previous slides, color contrast and palettes, buttons and interactive elements, forms and modals, and iconography and usage, spacing and alignment, responsive design layout, feedback status indications, alert colors, and navigation and interaction. So this part of the guide would be beneficial for a designer designing um, for the FarmLink application. And this concludes the presentation. Thank you so much for your time.